Hello, this is Jimmy Johnson here at IES Residential Education Center. Today we're going to be talking about transformers and how we can use Ohm's Law to find the amps. This is a continuation onto the Ohm's Law video previously, so if you haven't checked that out, now's a great time to... This is a continuation onto the Ohm's Law video This is a continuation onto the Ohm's Law video, so if you haven't checked that out first, I highly recommend it. So, right now coming into it, how many amps does a 75 kVA 120/240 single-phase transformer have? A little simplified. So breaking it down, the K is going to stand for 1,000, the VA is going to stand for volt amps, like we talked about before, which is another unit of power. Power. Whereas the 120/240 volts. And then the question is, how many amps do we have? So right off the bat, I know I'm going to be looking inside of this pink and purple area. So we're looking for amps, and we're going to have the power, and we're going to have the voltage. So what I'm looking for is going to be this one right here. I equals power divided by the volts, or E. Just going to go V. Or, simplified, amps is going to equal 75,000 divided by, and here comes the first question. Am I going to want to stick with the 120 or the 240? So these are two common voltages. This is the voltage you have inside your house, and whenever you're worried about the primary or secondary and it shows you 2 voltage, you're always going to want to go with the larger number. Because even though you have 120 volts available from the hot to the neutral, when we're talking about the panel, we're talking about the maximum voltage it can have between phase to phase. So it's going to divide by 240. Punching that in is going to give me a total of 312.5, and that's going to be amps as my answer. Now let's look at another way they could ask us this question. In fact, there are really 2 other ways they could ask this when they have the primary and the secondary into play. That's going to be found over here. So usually they're not going to ask you both. They're going to ask you one or the other. And so this is very similar. We have 50,000 kVA. So we're still looking for our amps. We still have our power, and we're going to have 2 separate instances of voltages. It's kind of interesting because the way transformers work is they don't create or destroy power. What they're going to do is they're going to have the same amount of power, the same 50 kVA for this transformer or 75 kVA for the other one. The amount of power is going to stay the same. What's going to happen is it's going to transform the voltage, and that's going to change the amperage. But they're always kind of going to equal the same power. So now we have the primary for this first question. And the primary is going to be the first voltage they told you. Sometimes they're going to tell you it's the primary, but otherwise you're going to worry about that as right here. And then the secondary is going to be very similar. So if we're worrying about the secondary, that's going to be the larger number over here. So a couple of ways they could try and trick you off the bat. If you've come into our test prep, we'll teach you a little bit more about the ratio But this is going to be a 2-to-1 ratio, a step-down transformer, and it's just how it works out. The number of windings inside there, all great stuff, really interesting, but it's not going to really affect you for the test. So working this problem out, how many amps does a 50 kVA, 50 kVA, 480 volt have on the primary? So all we're worried about over here is that same amps equals power divided by voltage. Amps equals now 50,000 divided by 480. So that is going to be 104.6. No, 0.16. All right. Now, if you guys see this pattern here, it should be pretty obvious what's going to happen next. Oh, just cut that out. Following the same pattern, we're going to go amps equals power divided by voltage. Amps equals 50,000. Now divided by 240. It's going to be double, but let's just take a look at it. 50,000 divided by 240 now is going to be 208.3. And it just kind of makes sense because the transformer is still going to have the same power, the same 50,000 kVA. So if I have 50,000 kVA, I have 480 volts, and I have 104 amps. Going through the Ohm's law, if you multiplied them together, it would give you 50,000 because you have the same amount of power. You're just changing the voltage, and you're having so many amps to give you that amount of power. And then down here, you're going to have the same 50,000, but now 240. Because you have half the voltage, you're going to have double the amps. To give you the same amount of power, you multiply them together, it gives you that same 50,000. And that's how we work out transformer problems. It's really just an Ohm's law question that they could ask you a couple different things about the primary, the secondary. They could trick you up with the 120/240. But if you know these couple of tips and tricks, it's just Ohm's law, and you're going to have a great time. Thank you. I'll catch you next time.